You are listening to the City Vent, proudly sponsored by the Westview Motor Company, supplying your new and used cars. Find us at westviewmotorcompany.co.uk.
Welcoming into another City Vent. Before we get started, just a quick shout out to our sponsor, Complete IT Systems Limited, providing industry-leading IT solutions for 14 years. It makes sense, right? Today, we are joined, first of all, Andy, how are you, mate?
I'm all right, sir. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm a little bit hungover, I'm not going to lie, but do you know what?
We've
got to carry on.
Why are you hungover?
Oh, no comment. Absolutely no comment. But today we are joined with two people who you will have heard a lot on the radio. We've got, first of all, I will introduce Jack Conlon. Jack, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks, lads. Cheers for having us on.
No worries. And also Louis, who is also as well you still will have heard him quite a bit on the West Yorkshire Daily, who is now taking over the reins of the commentary. Louis, how are we, mate?
I'm really good, thanks, guys. Thanks for having us on. And you mentioned your sponsor there, Chris. I probably needed it myself because it's taken an arm and a leg to get onto this podcast.
I think it's important to mention this. So we've just been waiting for Louis. Now, you would imagine that because he uses quite a lot of IT equipment at Valley Parade or wherever he goes, Louis had a bit of a stinker, haven't you? So he's really struggled to get on.
I'm on my third device, a different pair of headphones, but it seems to be working so far, touch wood. I don't have any wood around me, but fingers crossed it stays this way.
I was saying, whenever we're at games, it's always Louis that sets up the radio equipment and stuff. So out of the two of us, it should have really been me that was having the IT issues, not him.
Based on that performance, I'm surprised that he even gets games going.
Because I can't imagine Gary Jones is very IT literate. I mean, I've mentioned about hopefully getting him on in a little bit. I'm sure he will do, but I think it sounds a bit daunting to him going on the StreamYard and doing the podcast. But listen, we're here and we appreciate you guys coming on. And we just wanted to really just find out a little bit more about yourselves, obviously, because, you know, you're on the radio. We don't know much of your backstory. So, Jack, I'm going to come to you first, mate. So how did you get into all this? What's your story? What's your background?
So I grew up as a massive sports fan generally. I love football and rugby league's my other main sport. Always loved it growing up. I sort of, around the age of sort of 17, 18 was when I sort of decided I wanted to go into the sort of sports media industry. I think there's a cliche that a lot of people say about those who are journalists or people in the media, particularly in sport, that we're all just sort of failed footballers in a way, which is absolutely true. I played rugby and football growing up, was never good enough to make it properly, but sort of wanted to keep a little foot in it. And I ended up going to the University of Gloucestershire down in Cheltenham. Lived in Cheltenham for 3 years, which is an experience in itself. When the festival comes around in sort of March time, it sends a completely different beast down there. But yeah, I did a sports journalism degree for 3 years. Ended up getting some work experience with Radio Leeds during that time, and just sort of kept in touch with the sports editor Johnny Buchan there. Throughout my last year at uni. Did a few sort of freelance shifts towards the back end and have sort of been there ever since. So I think I'm coming up to about 3 and a bit years with Radio Leeds now, and I've sort of worked on different shows. I still do a decent amount sort of in terms of production behind the scenes. I'm still freelance, so I've still got sort of other bits going on. But and this year I've been lucky enough to sort of take a bit of a step to do some on-air stuff, hence why I'm at Valley Parade a fair bit this year, which has been brilliant, I've got to say. It always helps when the team are doing well and stuff, but it's one heck of a place to be able to be on a Saturday afternoon, as you guys well know.
Absolutely, and I think we can all agree that this season so far has been a very different place at Valley Parade. I mean, the game last week where fans were, after the Stevenage game, where there was actually fans cheering in the streets. To be honest, that's the first time I've seen that in a long time. Obviously, we drew yesterday, which we'll go into in a bit. But I suppose it just kind of makes things a lot easier for yourself if there's positive vibes around the club, right?
Absolutely. We sort of, you tend to sort of, when you get messages post-game, for example, a lot of our post-match stuff is to do with fans getting in touch and giving their views, and we try and push that as much as possible. And you often actually tend to get a lot more interaction on the back of a big defeat. But even this season, when with the club going the way it has and the results coming in, especially the past 4 or 5 games or so with that winning run, yesterday was interesting because there was sort of mixed views on that point. Whenever there's a late goal, especially an equaliser, it feels like a win in a sense, but there were still people who were judging the whole performance, as is only correct, and some that weren't that satisfied. But it does certainly help when the mood is good. You've got people after games coming in front of the commentary position and shaking hands with us and smiling, putting thumbs up. And generally, I think you can probably feel it when you're in the ground as well. There's such a positive mood just even in the air. And I think the Stevenage game was probably the biggest example of that, of how they'd beaten a Steve Evans side. I've got to say, a lot of people were quite pleased to get one over Steve Evans at the end, as you can imagine. But in the fashion they did it against a team that have only lost once prior to that game, I think that was a real statement game and showed a lot of the league that this is the real deal this year with Bradford City, and that then reflects on the crowd as well, because everyone else is feeling the exact same. And for that game, we had Gary Jones with us, and he commented on that as well, saying that he remembers the cup run season, obviously, when he was so involved with that, and the way the fans were that year. It very much feels similar to that at the moment, with the way everything's going with the club, with Mark Hughes being there. Everything's just a great vibe at the minute, and I guess on air for us, it certainly helps. I know when you speak to Louis, I'm sure he'll echo that. When it probably helps him when he's calling City goals as opposed to City conceding goals.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll mention one of the things that Andy put on Twitter yesterday. I think did you put easy wins? Is that right, Andy?
I got pelters for it as well. I shouldn't have used the word easy, let's put it that way, but it were a typical City thing to do, wasn't it? The second we put easy in, they go and make a pig's ear of it. But yeah, I did put easy. No game is easy by any stretch, is it? Let's be fair. But yeah, the City just dragged me through the mud. I'm not going to lie. But moving on to you, Louis, sir. Give us a bit about your background. Where'd you start? What have you been doing?
I mean, very similar to Jack. I always loved football, and I think my earliest memory that really got me hooked, and I'm sure we'll all remember it, and people probably have a bit of a smile looking back on this, was when England were playing Greece before the 2002 World Cup, and I would have only been 2002, 8 or 9 years old, and there was me, my dad, and my granddad. We were watching it at my grandma and granddad's house, and Beckham steps up and takes that free kick and scores. And I think even at 8, 9 years old, I didn't realise the significance of what the goal meant, and it meant England were going to the World Cup at the time. But I think it was just the absolute moment, and how football, especially, you have those split-second moments, and you've got to be in the moment to really love it and remember them. And I think Sky's advertising campaign this pre-season was, you can only have that moment once, and I think that really captured me into football and other sports as well. I don't mind my rugby league. I mean, Jack will know I'm not as big as a rugby league fan as him, but I guess working at Radio Leeds, where we cover a lot of rugby league and a lot of Yorkshire cricket and stuff, you start to like and become fond of these sports, and you want the teams to do well. And I always maybe fancied myself as when I was younger. I always thought, being a match of the day commentator would be a pretty good job. Certainly not good enough to play football. You should see my first touch. And I thought, well, the next best thing is either writing or talking about football. And I know it's cliche, because you could have all of us who work in the media on this podcast and would probably say the same thing. So when it came to university, I was like, right, what do I actually want to do? And I thought, to be honest, the only thing I really would love to do as a job is broadcasting or journalism. So it was a relatively new concept at the time and a new course. I went to UCFB, which was based over in Lancashire at the time. It's now at the Etihad in Manchester and down at Wembley. Did a football journalism and media course. And during that time, I got an internship at Burnley Football Club in their media department. And it was a pretty cool time, actually. If you remember, it was when Sean Dyche's second season, and they came second in the championship behind Leicester. It was when Leicester came up. And I worked for them that season, and then the season they were in the Premier League, which at the time they came back down actually the first time. And that gave me a really eye-opener into working in press boxes and dealing with players and managers. You know, there was the likes of Sean Dyche, Danny Ings, Tom Heaton were there, and they were all great with me. Finished university, and actually straight out of university, I couldn't for love nor money get a job in that industry. And I eventually settled on, I took a job at Sky, nothing to do with journalism, basically in the advertising department. I worked in commercial operations, and I didn't even realize this was a job, but it makes sense because someone has to do it. If you watch Sky TV, when it goes to an ad break, my job was to basically put those adverts in order. So I'd do that Monday to Friday. And I had a great time there, a brilliant place to work. Met some friends who I'm still really good friends with, still see. So when I did Sutton away last season, I stayed down in London and met up with the friends I made there. And they come up here every now and again. But it got maybe about 18 months in, and I thought, I can't do this forever. Like, I can't. It's not my passion. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to move back up to Leeds. I applied for, before the pandemic, local radio used to do a kick-off reporter scheme. So I applied for that, and I got through to the last 5. And I had an interview, and the Radio Leeds sport editor at the time, Gareth Jones, rang me up a couple of days later, and he's given me all this praise. And I'm sat there thinking, oh, I've got this in the bag. This is great. And he goes, but unfortunately, there was another lad who just answered a couple of questions better, so we're going to go with him. Absolutely devastated. But he said, look, I'm leaving. But Adam Pope, who does the Leeds United commentary, he was also on the interview, said he's happy for me to give you his email address, get in touch with him. So I got in touch with him, new sport editors came in, and similar to Jack, they just said, yeah, look, we can't offer you anything permanent, but do you want to come in a day a week or 2 days a week? It was behind the scenes stuff. So if you're listening to our show on a Saturday, all the jingles, all the music, the fact that our mics are live, there's someone sat in the studio pressing those buttons, putting the faders up and down and things like that, putting callers through. So that's how I got in, and I did that for maybe 18 months to 2 years, and we're in the second lockdown. No, it might have even still been the first. Yeah, it would have been the second, because it was January 2021, and Johnny, our editor, just said, Huddersfield Town are playing away at Watford, and I need someone to go and present the show. Would you be up for it? And of course, you've been thinking over these last 2 years, that's what I want to do. So did a few town games that season, and then last season, as you know, stepped up to doing a lot more city games, especially after the turn of the year last year, home and away with Jamie and Philippe and Gary or whoever it may be. Absolutely loved it. And then it's one of those industries, circumstance happens, and Jamie decided to leave initially for 6 months, and I applied for his role, and I'm doing that in the short term until we know whether Jamie's coming back or what happens with him. Never commentated on a football match before, the Doncaster Rovers game on the opening day of the season. And let me tell you, I mean, I wish him all the best, and it's horrible for him, but 5 minutes in to have a horror injury to Manny Osadebe, who's meant to be this exciting player, it was a challenge, but we got through that Doncaster game. I was exhausted afterwards, but I've absolutely loved it so far, and to be covering a club the size of City in this period, it's so exciting. You still pinch yourself that Mark Hughes is the manager. I think we all do, don't we, that Mark Hughes has come to Bradford City. But this squad is assembled, and almost a feeling of, this has got to be it. Surely this has got to be it. So that's, it's been a long old journey, but so far so good, and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I obviously I came over to talk to you before the Doncaster game and gave you a bit of praise, and I know how nervous you were, but listening back on that performance, it was great. And obviously we had the Gary Jones little segment, obviously, where he was pretty much crying. That was emotional to see that, especially from Gary Jones. But so I'd like to ask you, Jack, I'm going to ask you, so can you talk us through what you guys would do on a match day? How does that work? What do you do? Let's say in the morning time, how do you do the setup? What happens behind the scenes?
So we all sort of have our own routines, I guess, in the morning. I like to go for a run in the morning, bit of a bacon sandwich and a coffee on a Saturday morning. Very similar to like people who just go as fans, I guess. Everyone has their sort of pre-match routines, don't they? In the week, building up to the game, me and Louis will do our own prep. I always make my own crib sheet, as does Louis. That's just literally sort of, it'll be a load of City based facts. So last game, last win, current record, a big summary of the squad, how they did last season, etc. Then I'll sort of do one for the opposition as well. You know, how they've been getting on recently, their top scorers, players to watch out for. I know Louis does very similar with his prep in that sense as well. We'll also, in the couple of days before the game, the Thursday or the Friday, whenever Louis done the pre-match presser with Mark and whichever player we get, that audio will all be cut up into segments that will then make up our pre-match preview ahead of the game, that first hour before kickoff. That sort of gives us talking points a little bit as well, you know, stuff to discuss with our summariser amongst the three of us ahead of kickoff. We'll usually get to the ground around 2-3 hours before kickoff, there or thereabouts. I can't drive myself. I've got my test and lessons and stuff coming up later this year. So Louis is currently taxi service for me a little bit as well.
I'm banking those miles.
So we'll meet around probably 11:30ish and get over to Valley Parade from Leeds, where our sort of BBC HQ is in the centre of Leeds, and very much sort of set ourselves up straight away. We've got what's called an ISDN box, which effectively is our connection back to the studio, as Lou was mentioning there, so that we can link everything up and make sure that we can go out on air. We've got 3 different mics. Louis got a lit mic that he uses to commentate on during the game. We've got a couple of headsets with mics on them that me and either Philippe, Gary, whoever's summarising will use. We've also got an effects mic, which is what, if you ever see the videos of the interview with Mark afterwards, he'll use that whenever we chat to him. And we'll sort of just set everything up. We'll touch base with the guys who are in the studio, make sure that, you know, our levels are good, very much like how we did before we started recording this, you know, make sure we can hear everybody properly. Louis laughing there as, you know, it's a good job we tested, or else Louis wouldn't be with us.
Doesn't tend to take as long, to be honest.
No, it doesn't. It's a very much more fluid process whenever Louis sets it up at the games. And effectively, yeah, up until we go on air at 2:00, that's us. We'll set up and stuff, and we'll have a bit of a chill out. We'll speak to some of the other members of the media. Our summariser usually gets there anywhere between sort of half an hour, 15 minutes before kickoff. And I must say, one of the highlights of doing games is Eileen, who works in the press room at City. And if anyone sort of has followed, there's been a couple of Twitter threads this season that Eileen has featured on, and she basically she'll bake before a game and provide the press room with some absolutely fantastic cakes, as Louis will testify to. We've had ginger cakes this year. We had chocolate chip buns yesterday. We had what I thought was a Victoria sponge before she quite quickly corrected me and said it was just a sponge cake because it didn't have any fat in. Which, so you know, I've learned about baking this weekend as well. You know, so she sort of runs the press room and keeps everyone happy. And then yeah, we build up to 2:00, and as soon as the clock hand reaches 2, that's us. We're into it, and we'll have a little stager at the start, which is where you've got a bit of music, and you know we'll talk into the game, and we just sort of go from there. So yeah, it's a pretty routine sort of match day for us. Everyone, like I said, has their own little individual bits that they'll do here and there, but it's very routine. And once you've done it a few times, you settle in, and you know what your day is going to sort of look like, and then it's just sort of up to the players to do it on the pitch, and that gives us all our talking points and everything else that we need.
It's Louis, I'll ask you, have you got any rituals that you do before a game?
So Jack will tell you I have a big paper pad, and I'll do my match prep, but then I'll transfer that prep onto sticky labels. So then on my pad, because every commentator, every presenter do things slightly different. So some might just write out the squad numbers on a scrap of paper. Some will have big lists and charts. So I'll have on a clipboard all my prep. and then I'll have 11 sticky labels for the starting 11, so I can stick them down in the formation. And what I tend to look for, obviously, let's say, for example, Andy Cook's been great for this season because I think he's scored against every club there is in the Football League. Has Andy Cook scored? Yes, of course he's scored against them. So I always look for like a link between the players and the opposition and vice versa. So, the best one is always, have they played for that club before and how did they get on? Or you might have someone who's playing for Walsall and coming to Valley Parade, and a couple of seasons ago they scored at Valley Parade. So I like having links between the opposition and the current crop of players. In the morning, it's similar to Jack. I try not to be. Nothing beats, and whether it's a fan or Philippe and Gary tell us when you're playing, nothing beats waking up on a Saturday morning knowing you've got a match to go to. But if we're going to meet in Leeds City Centre at our office at 11:30, I'll try and use my morning time just to relax almost. Yeah, go for a walk around the park, or like Jack said, go for a run, or maybe just watch a bit of telly with a bacon sarnie and a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. And you can't switch off from it, but you do. I always try those couple of hours when I first get up on a Saturday, just relax, have a bit of time to yourself, because it's the best job in the world, but it's very demanding. You've got to be so focused, and the adrenaline high you get, and then when you come off air, you're exhausted. So it's not so much every weekend a set routine, but it's always allow myself a bit of time, and then we'll drive over. I guess we don't really talk about the game or City on the way over, do we, Jack? It's more, we get there, we get set up, and then we kind of put our hats on, and that's when we get into the zone, really. But yeah, during the week, as Jack said, it's interesting because we'll go to the press conference on a Thursday, and you've always got to get your team news, any fresh injury concerns, for Critchlow and Pereira weren't in against Steve, how are they getting on? How's Liam Ridehalgh getting on? So on and so on. You get a bit about the opposition, and then you've got to think about what's the story at the moment and what should we talk about. So when I last spoke to Mark on Thursday, I don't know if you guys agree. There may be some listeners who might disagree, but I thought the last few games especially, we've seen Richie Smallwood's quality really, really shine through. We knew the quality was there, but the last 3 or 4 games especially. So I thought, let's get a nice bit about Richie, for example. And then what I'll do when we chop up that little bit of audio, that's then a good talking point for me, Gary, Philippe and Jack to talk out in the game. So on a Wednesday, I'll always do a bit of prep for the press conference as well. So it's kind of like, what is the talking point this week and what shall we talk about on Saturday? So you kind of, once you've asked your questions that you need to ask in the press conference, I'll then take time to ask 2 or 3 to create those talking points and hopefully cause a bit of interaction with you guys on the text and the tweets and things. And really just, it's easy, but it's also a bit harder when things are going so well, because if it's doom and gloom, you can kind of probe, or why is this happening? Why don't you, if you thought about changing the formation, if you thought about bringing so-and-so into the squad, when it's going really well, you've almost got to think about, right, it's going so well, what shall we talk about? He's doing really okay. So you kind of have to think a little bit more. I don't know if Jack feels the same. And, I guess we're all football fans, aren't we? We seem to comment on things more when it's not going well than when it is. But yeah, so little routines. I wouldn't say I have a religious one that I stick to. But especially on a Saturday when I get up, I try and have at least a couple of hours just me time, basically.
Do you know, sorry, go on, Andy.
No, I'm going to move on. Not too far. Just a burning question. So far, you've been to a few away games. Which is the best press box you've been in with the best cakes? I like cake.
Are we talking specifically League 2?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me have. Oh, that's a tough one, because I can tell you a few of the worst ones. Shall I tell you? Actually,
give us the worst one as well. Name and shame, boys.
Barrow is difficult to work from, but there are lovely people at Barrow, so I'll let them off. It's bizarre at Barrow. I wouldn't necessarily say difficult to work from. It's just different. You're inside at Barrow. You're in like a proper old-fashioned box with a glass panel in front of you, and where we were positioned, right to my left, where you would look at the goal on the left-hand side, there was a big pole in front. So it's a bit of a difficult position. Not difficult, different, and just not being used to it. Honestly, the best one in League Two, and it's an easy one, and I'll think of another one. The best one is Valley Parade. You've got the perfect view, you're the perfect level. We're right on the front of our row, and when you've got Eileen baking cakes for you and serving you pie and chips,
going for
you
the
don't
brownie
get much
points.
better than that. Although it's a cramped press box once you're in, the people at Sutton United last season were brilliant. The chap who runs their media department, he had water, a few biscuits, not loads, but he really made us feel welcome, helped with everything. Leighton Orient's a funny one because you've got to go up in a lift and you're right at the top of the stand and you're sat almost on bar stools and you're looking down on the pitch like that. So that's a bit of a funny one. I'm trying to think the best now. Colchester's okay. You're a little bit low down, but they've got a press room.
Colchester's an odd spot. Yeah, you're really close to the pitch, which is contrasted with, because I've only got a small sort of sample size to choose from. I've only done a few away days. But Tranmere, for example, a couple of weeks ago, you are proper in the gods. You're right at the top of their main stand with a real sort of panoramic view of everything in front of you. But Tranmere would probably be my favourite this year so far in terms of the view you get. I think we didn't actually get any food at Tranmere, although me and Louis went to a lovely little spot by the river. That again, Adam Pope who does the Leeds United commentary had recommended to us when they'd been up there last year. It was like, it's a nice little. It's called the refreshment rooms. It's called in Tranmere, and we had a lovely fish and chips and a sticky toffee pudding as well. There's a lot of food sort of based themes here, aren't there? In terms of what we enjoy from a match day.
Bristol Rovers is a brilliant ground, brilliant view. And you get, we got a voucher, so we got like a Cornish pasty and a coffee and stuff. They were great. They were accommodating. But I think at the time I put a picture up of Jamie last season, and we were literally, our seats were right in the middle of the home end. And, I like to have a bit of room. You've got your desk, you've got your iPad for your messages and things like that. You've obviously got the ISDN box and the mics. And the 2 till 3 hour, I was effectively walking up and down the stairs because every 2 minutes someone was saying, "Excuse me, mate, can I just pop down the row?" So that was a challenge. I got the steps in that day, but a decent view. But I'd say, most difficult maybe Barrow just because of the circumstances. And genuinely in League Two, and I'm not just saying this, the best press area is Valley Parade.
It's interesting. I know we had Bantam's banter on a few weeks ago, and they mentioned that obviously they got to do matches in the press area, and they said that there's obviously the etiquette there, so you have to be reasonably responsible for your own actions, if you get me. And I know that they also mentioned that there was a couple of times where fans started shouting and screaming at them. Have you ever had any situations like that where away fans or obviously opposition teams, their fans have given you any abuse, or how you've dealt with that if that's happened?
The only one I'd say was last season, and it was a totally innocent mistake. The trip to Forest Green when Andy Cook bust everything to get onto that ball and score City's second goal, and it was so late on that was it. It was wrapped up, wasn't it? And at Forest Green, similar, the press bench is right in the middle of the home support. So our box is literally on the end of this little bench, and in front of us there's the home supporters, and this elderly chap in front of us, bless him. So there's a switch on the back of the box, and this Andy Cook's goal goes in, and he stands up in frustration and goes to leave, and he flicked the power on the box. So we fell off there completely. Jamie's doing this big, and he's scored, and City are winning on the road, and all of that. And the listeners would have then just heard dead air. and he was so apologetic, and I'm so, like, he was mortified that he had done it. And it was the same with the Bristol Rovers fans. They were all fine with us. I've had one time with watching Huddersfield Town. Oggy was doing the commentary, and Town scored, and I want to say, was it Luton? Might have been Luton, and that's again, you're quite tight in, and a couple of people turned round as if to say, basically to tell him to shut up, because he's getting all excited. Town have scored, but trouble-wise, not really. No, I don't know how we'll deal with it if we did.
Yeah, I want to kind of move on to Bradford this season now. So we've already talked a little bit about the atmosphere and how everything feels at the ground and at the club at the moment. So obviously for you two, I kind of want to ask you genuinely how you do feel this season's going. I mean, I know you've mentioned that you think that this must be the season, but Jack, I'll ask you first. So how does it feel different, I suppose, from anything else you've seen in previous years? I know you've not done massive amount for City, but how does it feel different for you?
Well, it's one of those where, when, as Louis mentioned earlier, we both sort of got into this position through doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff at Radio Leeds. It's impossible not to become unbelievably invested and keep an eye over everything anyway. So even though you're not in the ground, you still very much get the feel. We can see the same messages on Twitter or the texts that are coming through. We can see the same ones back at base that the guys can at the games, and generally sort of keep an eye over everything that's going on with the club. And that then comes down to, even when we're posting the post-match interviews on Twitter, you can see the comments that are instantly appearing under those. And certainly in the past couple of seasons, when it was Stuart McCall and Derek Adams, and when the results weren't going great, you can absolutely sort of tell the whole feel of the club, and the at times complete and utter disgust that certain people, certain fans will have for a manager or results or performances, etc. You can certainly feel, even though you're not at the games, you can feel that energy and that sort of tension, and I think that's sort of impossible to get away from in that sense. But I think the real sort of turning point, and I'm sure there's several that agree, was the appointment of Mark Hughes. And I know it's been said a lot that that's perhaps the biggest coaching appointment in the history of Bradford City. And I think that day, I remember, Louis can probably recount it better than me, the day that he was appointed. And I remember, I don't think I was in work on the day, and so I'd sort of woken up late to the news, and I sort of did a double take when I looked at my phone. And I was like, that Mark Hughes, that's it, that very same. And of course it was, and the press conference was that day to introduce him to all the media and the fans. And I remember it was like a switch just flipped, and all of a sudden there was positivity and real optimism about this coach who had such an illustrious managerial career behind him, had managed at the very top level, not to mention his playing career. There was this sort of renewed confidence all of a sudden from the fan base in what the club could become, and how the future all of a sudden, with the appointment of one man, looked really bright. And again, as you guys all know, the back end of last season, there was some great results. There were some that were perhaps a bit underwhelming or disappointing. But I think there was an understanding that this season was the real sort of proof will be in the pudding type of season. The back end of last year wasn't necessarily Mark Hughes' squad, as we saw 18 new arrivals over the summer. So I think there was certainly more patience towards the back end of last year, just waiting to sort of grind the season out, have some sort of consolidation period throughout the summer, and then really build for this year. And again, as I've mentioned, the feeling around Valley Parade on a match day, whether that's before the game, you've got people with smiles on faces, excited to go into the ground, and excited to see some players that can honestly just light up the entire stadium. Andy Cook has, what else can we say about him? 11 goals in the first few games. I think Louis had a stat yesterday that 12 he got last year, and he's already won away from that after just 10 league games and a few cup games thrown in there as well. The stat that we enjoyed yesterday as well was, I think before the game, I don't know if it still stands this now, but he was the third most prolific striker in Europe behind Erling Haaland and Robert Lewandowski. I think we mentioned that a good 3 or 4 times because that's a crazy stat. But you look at others like Scott Banks, for example, who is unbelievably exciting when he gets on the ball and he gets at his feet and goes head to head with his defender. We've seen renewed sort of confidence in Alex Gilead, amongst others. Matty Foulds has looked good in the last few games. There's a real sort of positivity around everybody, and the raw yesterday when Verdun Oliver headed that ball in stoppage time was unbelievable. And as we had Philippe Moraes with us yesterday, and he said he's not heard the stadium like that in a long, long time. And that's for an equaliser in a game that, Andy, as you said, should have been easy.
It should have been easy.
Or that City should have won. So the fact that that's the reaction you get when you draw against a team like Wimbledon who haven't started great, and people are walking out, perhaps slightly disappointed that it's not a win, but enthused that the team haven't given up and that there's character there. I think that's one of the main things. Is it's not just the quality on the pitch; it's the character of the players and the togetherness, and the fact that, again, it's a cliche, so it does feel like a family. Everyone seems to get on in that team, and that really rubs off at the ground and in the fan base. And I think that's really evident this year, especially compared to previous seasons.
I think last season we lose yesterday 3-1. If it were last season, there's just something about the side and that's got a bit more resilience about itself, and that's willing to keep going to the end. I'm not saying last season they didn't try or anything, but this season we just seem to be able to come back, bring ourselves back into it. I saw yesterday probably as a point gained rather than 2 lost based on the whole lot. It should have been 3 points. Let's not badger away from that. But come the end of the season, that could be a huge point for us, in fairness, because it's them sort of games that can turn the tide of a season. Wouldn't you agree?
I think you're spot on, Andy. I think, as you say, and what we were all feeling at 2:30 yesterday was like, come on, this has got to be a nailed on 3 points. And although it's a point and some may be disappointed, I think the manner how it's happened is, as you say, that's a massive point. But I think it also tells us a lot about this Bradford City side. As you said, in previous seasons, Wimbledon would have got a third goal and it would have been game, set and match. As we touched on at the start, we know the quality's there. We know the potential's there. We know the togetherness is there. And it shows that this Bradford City side aren't going to lie down and people need to take them seriously. We spoke about it a lot in our coverage last season, that when City fell behind, it's almost like they felt sorry for themselves, and it knocked the stuffing out of games and heads would drop. You don't get that with this side, and Wimbledon score a great free kick and they go 2-1 up, but City were still going, and it almost felt, didn't it, like something can still happen here. Whereas in previous seasons, as you say, would have we seen that? No. So I think it's a big testament to the character in this side. And look, come April, come May, when we know how tight it is, Forest Green at one point last season looked like they were running away with it, and they only wrapped up the title on the last day. That point could be massive. And I think psychologically as well, that surely will give the players the momentum going into Harrogate and beyond.
I think it's important you mentioned there as well. And I think if I look back at a couple of weeks ago when we played Tranmere, and obviously we were 1-0 up at half time, went to 1-1, they were all over us. Now that Bradford City team last year would have lost. But there's no doubt about it. We would have lost, and we actually did lose that game.
They did it, when they were 1-0 up at half time.
Yeah, and it just felt, personally for me watching it felt like I kind of thought that we were going to win. And that's not been a mentality that I have had for a long time with this Bradford City team, where I thought, you know what, we can actually win this game rather than, here we go again. We're going to lose this. We're going to fall apart again. And I think it's, it's really interesting hearing from you guys as well, mentioning that you're seeing that. So, Louis, tell us who's kind of stood out for you this season with players. I know you've mentioned Richie Smallwood already, but what kind of players have really stood out for you and have made probably the difference, I guess?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, just quickly, just going back to a point Jack made, is just the refreshment of this squad. It's so new. You know, those players there last season who have now left the club, who had been there 2-3 years, who are all good players in their own right. You know, I'm thinking Pawdy, I'm thinking Callum Cook, I'm thinking Elliott, who decided to go on to new things. It feels like such a refreshment and such an opportunity. I think Matty Platt and Romany Critchlow at the back have been superb. I think Matty Platt, the last 3 or 4 games, I mean, wow, he's really shown what he's about.
Barely lost a header. Barely lost a header.
Winning every header, last-ditch tackles, last-ditch tackles. Matty Folds yesterday. I think Matty Folds, in a way, you kind of feel sorry for him because he's got Liam Ridehalgh in front of him. But whenever he comes in, for me, I don't think he puts a foot wrong. I think Richie, now we've got into the season, he's certainly showing that quality, isn't he? Just that, it's that vision, it's that intelligent reading of the game. He knows where the run is. He knows what pass to make. And I think at times recently that Bradford City have missed that kind of player. Just the one to keep calm. I can see that run. I'm going to pick that pass out and make it a successful pass. And I think the wide players, I think Scott Banks has been an absolute joy to watch so far this season. Long may that continue. We spoke to him after the Hartlepool win, and on a personal level, what a lovely young lad as well. He big smile on his face. He loves being here, wants to learn, wants to improve, and that's only a good thing for Bradford City. I think Tyreek Wright's looked really good. It's interesting, isn't it? I think that's the difference. The caliber of players that have attracted this season, and how there's a player in every single position. I think Harry Chapman's really coming into a bit of a pomp at the moment. He did well to keep his head yesterday. He's maybe got a little bit of a temper inside him at times, but he clearly managed that. And I think it is funny, isn't it? I think the standout, we can't hide from it, is someone who was there last season. It's Andy Cook. He's a completely different player. Everything he touches turns to gold. And I guess when you are a centre forward like Andy Cook and you are in form, it's just every header, every touch seems to go in. But he's playing with confidence. He's loving every minute of it. We spoke to him after Tranmere and I said, look, you know, we're mid-September and I think he would have got to 10 goals by then. Did you really think you'll be stood here talking about the fact you're on 10 goals? And he went, can't really believe it myself, to be honest. So I think the players, for me, the ones that are standing out are definitely Smallwood, the 2 centre-halves. Shout out to Timmy Odesina as well, by the way, who's come in the last couple of games. And Andy Cook has just been a revelation. I think you look at the bench though as well. I've actually been really impressed with Jan Songo when he's come on this season, and he was probably one of the shining lights of last season. And okay, he's maybe not first choice, and he probably won't be this season. But doesn't that sum up the character and the attitude of this City squad? That they all want to be there. Mark Hughes has said time and time again, they will all play a part. And they need to buy into that. And I think Jan and I think Matty Folds, they've really epitomised that so far.
I think one that you missed off there as well, for me, it feels like a new signing is Gilly.
Yeah.
Being in the middle, he's transformed into he's something else like this season. I don't know about you, but I think he suits the centre mid position so much better than a wide position.
He's like that link between. Sorry, Louis. I was going to say he's like that sort of. If you look at Smallwood as this sort of lead defensive midfielder in a sense, one that will just sit in front of that back four, still go up and down, but he likes to sit in front of the back four and distribute from there. Gilead, I've very much seen as the sort of link between him and that attacking midfield three, one that will go between and move here and there. And I tell you what, as well, his ability to find space is fantastic. I can't remember which game it was. It's in the past couple of weeks, and it's like he had flies on him. No one could get near him at all. You know, Smallwood would pick him out with a pass, and he'd be there with 5 to 10 yards of space every single time, and that's through his own movement. Now, I can't sort of profess to say that I saw loads of him as a winger. Or as more of an attacking player, like he played a lot last season. But certainly as a player dropping back into that central area, he has looked fantastic. And he's one of those that's perhaps not garnered as much praise as your Andy Cooks or your Scott Banks for the goals that he's scoring. but I think it's probably fair to say that Bradford City certainly look like a better machine in terms of an overall performance when he's in that midfield.
100%. I think him and Smallwood, they've had such a short period of time together, but they've created such a relationship on the field. They understand each other so much already. And like last season, I thought he'd run into space and he'd run with the ball, but he'd kind of like run out of an idea of where to go with it. Once he got up near the 18-yarder, he'd kind of worry about what he's going to do with it. But now he's picking passes and he's spraying passes that, like you saw Smallwood yesterday, spray a nice switch straight over, straight across from left to right. And he's doing the same. And last season, I just don't think he'd have had the confidence. And I think that breeds a lot from learning from Smallwood. I think he's using Smallwood's experience to improve his own game. And I think the relationship they're building is only going to get stronger. And as long as we can keep him fit, because I do think we miss him. When he's not played, we've kind of lost the central midfield a bit.
I think they're spot on with the passes and the confidence there, Andy. I think a prime example yesterday, in the first half, he drifted out on the left, Gilead, and instead of going down that left channel, he cut back inside, and he saw Luke Hendry over on the right-hand touchline and just played the most perfectly weighted pass over the middle of the park, missed all the Wimbledon players and found its way to Hendry. And Philippe even said in commentary, it's the confidence, not just to see that pass, but think, I'm going to back myself to make that pass. And he does. He seems like a player reborn, because he was maybe one of those in the discussion over summer. Look, although he's still in contract, how much of a part is he going to play? And he's come into this central midfield role, and he hasn't really looked back.
No, I completely agree. And I think one thing as well that we probably missed out a little bit is his defensive work. He's chasing back. I look at the Stevenage game, for instance. There was a couple of times where he was chasing his man all the way back and he was winning the ball. And that's another thing that sometimes I think in those central midfield roles you don't see as much. But actually, you know, the guy's he's got rocket on his feet. I swear, he just seemed to be everywhere. And that's the kind of player. I'm really glad that obviously Mark Hughes has seen him and gone, actually, I don't think you're a winger. I know that when he was at Scunthorpe, he did win every single award ever that season for being the winger. And the first time round we saw him, he was a winger, but he is a completely, you know, he's a new player and he's reborn, and it's just really good to see. So I'm going to ask you, Andy, because obviously I wasn't there yesterday. Let's talk about Wimbledon. So
let's. So for me, right, here we go. So Banks' free kick, just spectacular. He knuckleballed it, is the only way I can sort of like describe it. And I was shocked that Smallwood gave it up to him, to be fair, because I think that Smallwood's set pieces have improved over recent games, but I do feel like we needed to see more of Banks' set pieces, because that's how he was sold to us. But that free kick, it was sublime, wasn't it? You can't say fairer than that. But then we did what we've been doing a lot this season, in my opinion, and we scored a goal early on, happy days. Rather than going for the jugular, we've took us foot off at gas and allowed them to have time on the ball. I think an issue with Bradford City sides, even in the past, we tend to stand off as man. We never really fully press as a team, and we stand off and give them a bit too much time. Whereas they started pressing us and getting themselves right back into the game, and obviously then Drysdale started getting himself involved again. I can't stand Drysdale. I'm not saying he's the reason for us playing back, because we didn't help ourselves at all. But I think he had a good first sort of like half hour, and then he realised the spotlight wasn't on him. So he had to start making a bit of a few silly decisions. But yeah, then Wimbledon, they were all over us. I'm not going to lie. We didn't do enough to prevent them having all that time and space. their free kick was just as sublime as Banks's, to be fair. I mean, two keepers weren't saving that. I thought Lewis were really unlucky with their first goal as well. He made
initial save.
Yeah, the initial save were fantastic. And obviously, the rebound, you're not getting near that. So yeah, and then the play acting. I can't condone the play acting. I mean, it's something that needs to be abolished from football, but it's never going to happen. It's a pipe dream. But on the whole, just for a Bradford City performance, I'd say it's probably one of the most disappointing performances because we had such a big opportunity to get that 4-0, 5-0 steamrolling of a team against Wimbledon, because that first 20 minutes we should have taken them by the scruff of the necks because they were there for the taking. Don't know how you two feel about that. What's your thoughts?
I think, the last 3-4 games we've seen an early City goal, and that's great. And I think I don't want to get too downbeat, actually, because it's actually, when you see 18 points, so that's just under 2 points a game in your first 10, that's a great start. I mean, I don't know what's going on at Leyton Orient. That's just ridiculous, that start. But to put it into context, it's a good start, isn't it? I think maybe the one I don't even want to call it a weakness, but the one chink in City's armour is maybe, and a couple of the fans in front of us were talking to us about this at half time, is just that we haven't seen that killer instinct yet. You go 1-0 up in the 3rd minute, and they were, the 10-15 minutes after the tails were up, that's when you need to be getting your second, your third goal. And I hope, and I'm sure it will be, it'll only be a matter of time before we see a 4-5-0. The quality is absolutely there to 100%. Do that. We know that. And Mark Hughes said after the game, he said, the one thing we try not to do is to get sucked into the opposition's game plan. And they did yesterday. And it was really interesting having Philippe with us, and giving that player point of view, because as that first half went on, because City couldn't find that their second goal, Wimbledon growing confidence. Was it Chislett who hit the bar? And then a couple of minutes later, we had the similar curling shot in front of the Kop, which was well wide in the end. But Philippe was saying they're growing in confidence now. And it is frustrating, isn't it? Because as we say, we know the quality's there. Just go on, get that second, get that third, and then you can have a bit of fun in that second half. Because we didn't see Hughesy doing any kick-ups on the side yesterday, did we? Because we side in the end was chasing the game. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm downbeat, but that maybe is the only thing we haven't seen from even against Stevenage. And I know it ended 3-0, but that first half as well, it's almost like Stevenage grew back into the game. And I do feel it's only a matter of time, and they will work out how to do it. But that's just maybe one thing that we might look on negatively over these first 10 games, is just not being able to put that game to bed. Luckily, in the end, it didn't cost City the game entirely. And as we said earlier on in the podcast, that could be a really important point, and I think it symbolises a lot about the side. But I think you can see where some fans may have a bit of frustration, because it was, after 3 minutes, it was there for the taking.
I think the buzzword there, Lou, as well, was frustration. And I think you could see that on the pitch as well. There were moments, particularly on just after that first goal yesterday, where, again, after Scott Banks' goal, where there were a couple of big chances that didn't go City's way. And I think the more and more that happens, the more there is a frustration on the pitch that, we're creating all this play, we're doing really well, but we're not reaping the rewards. And I think that very much allowed Wimbledon back in, is that they perhaps thought, the roll of the dice is with us today. We're getting that drop of luck in that City having these chances but aren't quite putting them away. And interestingly as well, the media guys at Wimbledon yesterday said that that's the best they've played all season, which to an extent doesn't come as a surprise. I think you'll see a lot of that from sides who come to Valley Parade, is that naturally their game steps up. Simply because of where they're playing and what the atmosphere is like. It can very much, we have this discussion quite a bit before and after games, that while it can very much motivate City, it can also motivate the opposition as well to turn up and try and quiet the stands and the fan base. But I think that frustration probably grew as the game went on. All of a sudden, City have gone from being quite commanding with a 1-0 lead, not being able to build on that, to being at 1-1, to then being at 2-1. I think there was a moment where Andy Cook went quite close. It was Scott Banks had made a move down the left-hand side when he'd switched there in the second half, and he put one of those low crosses across, looking for Cook to just get a toe on it, and it was just slightly too far in front. And I think they both sort of just put their hands up to each other, and were quite clearly annoyed that a move that we've seen work perfectly so much this season was just not quite there. And the more that frustration sort of seeps in, I think there were a few more missed passes than we used to yesterday. And then naturally, as you mentioned, Andy, when those sort of tactics from Wimbledon came in where they were trying to slow the game down, there were players with cramp, as they'd probably like to say. Those sorts of tactics, which again we've seen from several sides this season, started creeping in. That frustration grew, but like Lewis said, I don't want to be sort of downbeat, because ultimately they managed to go past those frustrations and really sort of build back into the game. And when they went long ball towards the end, you sort of thought at times it was maybe a hide into nothing, but all it takes is that one opportunity late on, and the introduction of Oliver and of Angol as well, two tall players, I think certainly made the difference. And I think the roar from the crowd, and I think you saw a bit of relief on the players' faces as well when that goal went in. There's a brilliant video which City have put up on their socials of an alternative angle of the goal from just behind just to one side of the net as it goes in. And you might have seen some of the stills as well from it. Alex Gilliard absolutely screams in the face of the Wimbledon number 33, which I think is probably just a relief of that frustration that had been building for sort of 15, 20 minutes, to just go, look what we've managed to do now. Yeah. We've sort of pushed it right back in the faces. So I think that there were certainly signs of frustration that we've seen at other times this season, particularly yesterday though. But again, we won't be too downbeat, because that let go, I think, changes the entire complexion of that game.
Yeah, I really hope as well. Verdane getting his first goal, and finally, I'm hoping that gives him the kickstart. Like, I've not been his biggest fan. I thought it was a pretty strange.
That's been a bit light, saying it loosely there, Andy.
I'd try to be diplomatic about it. No, but I wasn't enthralled by his signing. I didn't think that his style of play fit into this Mark Hughes style of football that it looked like he was building during pre-season. And when he's played, I've not been too impressed with him. Obviously, he's a City player, so I want him to do well. And I'm really hoping that now he's got that goal, he can kick on, because we were talking about it last night on a space. Andy Cook's form is going to dip, because it's natural. All footballers' forms dip. He might get injured, hopefully not, touch wood. And we need the goals to come from somewhere. And so I'm really hoping that spurs him on, especially with it being such a last-minute gasp win to get the draw. Felt like a winner. I'm hoping that spurs him on, because I think in the winter months he might come good for us. Because
I think that's a fair point. And to be honest with you, I thought against Stevenage, I thought he actually looked quite good. He had a couple of good runs. He looks a lot fitter. He's obviously not really had much of a pre-season. I think it's fair, but I'm really chuffed for him that he got that goal, and hopefully now he can kick on and score plenty of goals, even whether it's on the bench. Just come on just for those last 20 minutes, as you mentioned, Lee Angol. Oliver coming off the bench. That's crazy, right? That's the crazy amount of talent to have on the bench.
Yeah, so, it is. And it must be hard for Verdane watching Andy Cook, in his position, scoring 11 league goals, and we're not even league goals, in all competitions, should I say, 11 goals in all competitions, and we're not even at the end of September. But you're right, Andy, you're right, Chris. The fact he's come on and scored a goal of that magnitude, I mean, he spoke to us after the game, and he was absolutely buzzing. He said, look, at the end of the day, I've come here to get promoted. I've not come here to, for me to boost my goal scoring personal record. He said, I want to score as many goals as possible, but ultimately I want to see this team and be part of a squad that gets promoted. And yeah, he said it was a big relief to get the goal. And I asked him, how has it been watching from the bench Andy scoring for fun every week? And he said, if it's good for the team, then, he's happy with that. He says, look, of course it's difficult. He's in the same position and you're thinking, I want that shirt. But it's that mindset we go back to of this squad, that togetherness. And you might only come on for 20 minutes here or there. You might pop up with the odd goal. But if it's for the greater good, and let's be honest, let's not beat around the bush, the aim this season is for City to get promoted. Yeah. And if it contributes to that, then it seems those players who might not have had the impact we would have hoped so far, or have not played as many minutes, the attitude actually seems they're still happy to play that part, however small or however big.
Yeah, I think I saw that as well, about the ethos. It's like Matty Folds, he's been doing a bit of press work. I'm not sure whether it were in the TNA or whether it were on BBC Radio Leeds. And
he spoke to us on Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he said to you guys that even though he's not been on the pitch, he's just so happy that the team is doing well, and it just seems to be a massive part of this team. And I think that's what's endearing the fans towards it as well, because obviously there's a Mark Hughes effect, but the players still have to have that personality about us, about them, and it feels like this team gets what it is to be a Bradford City player and what it is to be for Bradford City fans, and what we expect is, all we want is passion. And you put in 110% every week, we'll back you to the hills. You know what I mean? And I think we are seeing that from, and we haven't seen it in so many seasons as well. Which
what I found really interesting just on that point, Andy, and I don't know how much of Mark Hughes' pre-match press conference you heard on Thursday, but he was talking about, I really feel the squad has started to gel. And I said to him, you know the players a lot better than I do, and what Simon, who was in the room with me, what we do. Has it surprised you how quick they've gelled? Because ultimately at the time we were only 9 league games in, but has it surprised you? And what was fascinating, he said, when it came to the recruitment process, it wasn't just, are they technically a good footballer? Do they have the ability? But they did a lot of due diligence. They rang people who had played with them, rang people who had managed them. What kind of character are they? If they go through a spell on the bench, are they still happy with that? How passionate are they? Do they want to come and be successful? And what a great recruitment policy to have. And, whether that's come from the guys behind the scenes, whether Mark Hughes has bought that attitude because he's been at such a high level. He's not just bought in players based on the quality. He's bought in players based on the character. And I really think that's what we're starting to see. So sorry to have interrupted you.
No, it's fine. It's a conversation back and forth. And I think I'd agree with that. Since Stephen, Jen and Hughes have come in, it feels a lot more professional around the club. Everything, you've got Ryan sorting things out, like the commercial side. And then on the playing side of things, you've got these players coming in, they're all buying into this. And it just, as a club in general, I think we feel it seems a lot more professional than it has done over previous years as well. So I totally agree with that, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and it's quite interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that, Louis, because that's something I've not heard before, and I think that just shows where this club is going now from the years and years and years of crap that we've had, and where the philosophy is you'll have a player for 2 years, then they move on. But I just get the feeling with this club that we're building for the future, and a lot of these players that have come in that are quite young will be staying here for a long time.
Yeah,
and it's good to see. Boys, I'm going to move it on to the last little bit, okay? So we have got a quiz for you, okay? So I'm going to do it one at a time, okay? Let's see how much you know about Bradford City. Hopefully you should know.
You're going to expose us now.
Yeah, probably.
Louis, I'm going to get you. You're going to answer the first question, okay? And then I'll go to Jack for the next one. Okay, so What year were Bradford City formed?
I know this one. 1911.
Oh no!
No!
I know this
no.
one. I know this one.
I know it. I've changed my answer. Is it too late?
Go on.
1903.
See,
Shall I
I'm
tell you
not
why?
the only one who gets it wrong.
Shall I tell you why I say 1911? One, the FA Cup, and two, it's in the Wi-Fi password in the media department. And I gave it to someone yesterday, so it jumped into my head straight away. You can edit that bit out. I know it's live.
Not a chance. It's
Not a
staying in,
chance.
Louis. Listen, the amount of pelters I got for putting 1906, I said 1906. Thought I was really clever with it, and I got it wrong. So
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Don't feel too bad. Jack, here's your question. I'm going to give you within the nearest 1,000. What is the capacity of Valley Parade?
Oh, no. You know what? We talk about this a fair bit, and I'm horrendous with guessing, like, whenever there's grounds. Oh, no.
I'll give you 1,000. Either way.
I'm going to go... Let's go 25.
The answer is 25,136. Well done.
There we go.
I'm going to class that as 1-0.
Oh. Yeah, go on. Yeah, 1-0. Like that.
See, Louis should know this. I'm expecting that this was on your fact sheet, but it might not be. We'll see. How many league goals did Oliver score for Gillingham last season?
Now, he scored in total. I've got his total for Gillingham. But I've got it all in one. His total for Gillingham was 27 in 77. Last season, league goals in League One, and
goals.
it came down 8.
Ooh, nearly 10. That's not bad. I mean, he was their top goal
You're
scorer.
really exposing me here. I wish my laptop had never connected.
Oh, Jack. Okay, next question. Name at least 3 of Andy Cook's ex-teams. Previous teams.
So Mansfield.
Yeah.
And before that, I'm drawing a blank here. Let's have a think. Some really random ones. Oh. Let's go for someone like Tranmere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great guess.
One
more. Oh, someone really random. Let's go for Oldham.
Ooh.
Oh,
Unlucky.
Who else could I have had?
So you could have had Barrow, you could have had Grimsby, you could have had Walsall, you could have had Carlisle because he started his career there. And technically, you could have had Workington as well. So I'm surprised you didn't get Workington.
Walsall's the one that I'm annoyed about. Walsall.
He scored against Walsall this season, didn't he?
There we go. Okay, Louis, what was the original name of Bradford City?
Oh, God. You've thrown me under the bus. Can I just say Jack's had a lot easier questions, but I was always going to say that. You know what? I don't have the comments box open, and I'm sure I'm getting pelters at the moment. Manningham FC.
I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you it because it was Manningham Rugby Club, but I think that's fair enough. So I'm going to give you that one.
I'll take
Great
it.
Effort.
Half a point.
Great effort.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, you've had a couple of pelters.
You feel sorry for me, don't you?
I am, yeah, that's why, Louis. Otherwise, you'll never come on again and talk to me again. So I've got to give you that one. Last question, Jack. So in the Hartlepool game, away from home, who scored the first goal for Bradford?
The first goal. Oh, I remember this one because we were at a great angle, and it was Scott Banks, I believe, with his first goal for City. Because he'd done the move that he tried a couple of times in the games before, where he sort of stands the defender up, tries to send the defender to his right, cuts back onto his left, and hits it, and that's what he did.
Even better.
There we go.
I think Jack, we can safely say you know more about football, and especially Bradford City than Louis. So you need to go to your bosses about that.
At Harrogate, it'll just be Jack and Philippe. I'm not needed.
You could do.
No,
your
you
own
need
work
it. You need to
instead.
hook it all up, don't you?
Yeah, it does actually. Yeah, we need.
I'll hook it up
for the
and go.
technical support.
Last question to you both, Jack. Predictions for the season. Where did Bradford City finish?
See, this is an absolute minefield of a question. This, which I said to you beforehand, and I think it'll be absolutely at least top 7. I'd say I am going to go with a 4th place to finish.
Who's going up then? Just to second that then. Who's going up in the autos if City out there?
I think Orient will carry on in the fashion they have done. And I think second, you've probably got about 8 or 9 clubs who are there or thereabouts. One of them being City, so I couldn't say second, but I think Orient will carry on as they are.
Yeah, I think
that's my diplomatic answer.
Yeah, Louis. Yeah, question to you. You got a chance to redeem yourself a little bit here, mate.
Well, I agree with Jack. For me, and you know, we can revisit this at the end of the season. I think top 7's nailed on. I was thinking, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to go one better than Jack. I think I'm going to go 3rd, an automatic promotion.
Same as mine.
I think Leighton, and again, we are only 10 games in, aren't we? Look at Forest Green; they almost slipped up. I think Leighton Orient look unstoppable. I think we've got to think of Mansfield Town are in pretty good form, and they were so close last season. Northampton Town, I think they're always up there. I know we've got to mention those over the Pennines at Salford. And then you look at, you know, some of the clubs who have started well, Stevenage and Barrow, who were, let's be honest, they were tipped to go down. And there's always one, isn't there, like a Barrow, like a Stevenage, who you think they're going to fall away, and then they never do. Absolutely agree with Jack. There's going to be 8 or 9 clubs going for 2nd and 3rd, but I think 18 points after 10 games, 1.8 points a game, unbeaten at home. I think if City can average that, I think 3rd place, and they won't be too far off 2nd or 1st. It's not going to be massively comfortable. I'm sure we're going to get to like the Easter fixtures and the early May fixtures where every game feels like a cup final, but that's why we love it. But I'm going to go 3rd, and we don't have to deal with the pain or the pleasure of the playoffs.
Great stuff. Listen, guys, honestly, it's been a real pleasure having you on today. Just also listening about, you know, the background and obviously learning a little bit more about you guys as well. Andy, appreciate you coming on, mate.
Anytime. Thanks, guys, for coming on. Like I listen to you guys every week because I don't live in Bradford. I'm down here in South Wales, so I get to listen to your lovely voices every week. And do you know what? You're doing a cracking job. Keep it up. You'd never know that it were your first season, full season going at it. So, yeah, just keep up the good work. Keep it fun.
Really appreciate it, Andy. And thanks for having us on, Chris.
No worries. And I echo exactly what he said as well. You guys are great, and keep on keeping on. And let's hope it's a good year for City. And as I've now started finishing it as up the chickens. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Cheers.